everyone, and welcome to another edition of Let's Talk Criterion and a look at the forthcoming February releases in the collection. Starting in the UK, first of all, where we have just two releases, the late Jean-Luc Godard's Vivre Sa Vie, that's Film en 12 tableaux, and John M. Stahl's 1936 Imitation of Life. This title's getting a UK release a month after its US release, a common occurrence, of course. And again this month, we only get two releases here in the UK, which appears for us to be the new norm. Meanwhile, in the US, we have the 4K UHD 3 Colours Trilogy upgrade from Krzysztof Kieslowski, Romeo and Juliet from Franco Zeffirelli, the 4K UHD upgrade of Richard Linklater's Dazed and Confused, already in the collection of course, two films from Marguerite Duras, that's India Song and Baxter Vera Baxter, and finally Hollywood Shuffle from Robert Townsend. Please like and subscribe as you see on the screen below. Krzysztof Kieslowski has a sound place in the collection with his 10-part film series Decalogue, one of the 20th century greatest achievements in visual storytelling. It's set in a Polish apartment block and the double life, of course, of Veronique. Now, it's been more than a decade since Criterion released the old-timer 3 Colours set, which gave Krzysztof Kieslowski's three masterworks what seemed to be their fullest due, transfers well above the Miramax DVDs that have spent so many years on collectors' shelves, a semester's worth of supplemental context to boot. Sight unseen now, I had to wonder at the necessity of such a 4K restoration and subsequent release, until I saw a trailer last year for the Janus forthcoming retro, and even on a compressed 4K video stream from Vimeo, I could certainly see every millimetre of coffee infiltrating the sugar cube, the blood running in Julie Delpy's veins, the deepest of reds and the deepest of blues. So much texture and noise, well past anything that's not a 35mm print. So it's certainly great to see the fairly recently restored films appearing so quickly on a 4K upgrade from Criterion. All of Kieslowski's movies centre on the metaphysical, the unknown, the ideas of our doppelganger, our other secret lives, heavy doses of fate, chance, destiny and morality. And the breathtakingly humanist 3 Colours Trilogy wasn't much different. It starred Juliette Binoche as a grieving widow in blue, Julie Delpy as a woman trying to divorce her husband in white, and the late great Jean-Louis Trintignant and Arine Jacob in a story about a retired judge spying on his neighbours and the ethical and moral questions, of course, posed when he is caught. The films are all also loosely tied together in a way that I won't spoil, of course. Kieslowski co-wrote all his ambitious and lofty movies with his collaborator Pisevitz, and in 3 Colours Trilogy, the films Blue, White and Red, they're loosely based each on one of the films on the 3 political ideals in the motto of the French Republic: liberty, equality and fraternity. So let's break down the 3 films. 3 Colours Blue. In the devastating first film of the 3 Colours Trilogy, Juliette Binoche gives a tour de force performance as Julie, a woman reeling from the tragic death of her husband and her young daughter. But Blue is more than just a blistering study of grief. It also is a tale of liberation, and as Julie attempts to free herself from the past while confronting truths about the life of her late husband, a composer. Shot in sapphire tones by Sławomir Idziak and set to an extraordinary operatic score composed by Zbigniew Przesnier, Blue is an overwhelming sensory experience. 3 Colours White. It's the most playful and also the grittiest of Kieslowski's 3 colour films, and it follows the adventures of Karol Zbigniew Zamachowski, a Polish immigrant living in France. The hapless hairdresser opts to leave Paris for his native Warsaw in Poland when his wife Julie Delpy sues him for divorce, her reason being that their marriage was never consummated, and then frames him for arson after setting her own salon ablaze. White, which goes on to chronicle Karol's elaborate revenge plot, manages to be both a ticklish dark comedy about the economic inequalities of Eastern and Western Europe, and a sublime reverie about twisted love. And of course, 3 Colours Red has Krzysztof Kieślowski close his three Colours trilogy in grand fashion, with an incandescent meditation on fate and chance. It stars Irene Jacob as a sweet-souled yet sombre runaway model in Geneva, whose life dramatically intersects with that of a bitter and retired judge, played by the late Jean-Louis Trintignant. Meanwhile, just down the street, a seemingly unrelated story of jealousy and betrayal unfolds. Red is an intimate look at forged connections and a splendid final statement from a remarkable filmmaker at the height of his powers. The new 4K restorations of the three Colours trilogy opened last year at film at New York's Lincoln Center, and a national rollout duly followed. There's a strong case to be made that Kieślowski is the greatest filmmaker most movie lovers don't know, and this is the perfect opportunity to rectify this ongoing cinematic transgression. Now, the extras on the three Colours trilogy set are the same as the original Blu-ray release were, and these are 4K UHD and Blu-ray, new 4K digital restorations with 5.1 surround DTS HD master audio soundtracks. In the 4K UHD edition, we've one 4K UHD disc for each film, presented in Dolby Vision HDR, and one Blu-ray of each film with special features. They are 3 cinema lessons with director Krzysztof Kieślowski, interviews with co-writer Krzysztof Kieślowski, Peszkiewicz, composer Zbigniew Przesnier, and actors Julie Delphi, Irene Jacob, and Zbigniew Zamachowski. Selected scene commentary featuring actor Juliette Binoche. Video essays by film critics Annette Insdorf, Tony Raines, and Dennis Lim. A documentary from 1995 featuring Kieślowski. 3 short films from Kieślowski: The Tram from 1966, 7 Women of Different Ages from 1978, and Talking Heads from 1980, plus the short film The Face from 1966, starring Kieślowski himself. Interview programmes on Kieślowski's life and work, featuring Binoche, Insdorf, Jacob, film critic Jeff Andrew, filmmaker Agnieszka Holland, cinematographer Zladwomir Idziak, producer Marin Karmitz, and editor Jack Witta. Behind the scenes programmes for White and Red, and a short documentary on Red's world premiere. And there's trailers. And of course essays by film critics Colin McCabe, Nick James, Stuart Clowens, and Georgina Evans, and an excerpt from Kieślowski on Kieślowski, and reprinted interviews with cinematographers Idziak and Edward Klosinski, and Piotr Sobocinski. Covers are by Sarah Habibi. Three Colours trilogy by Krzysztof Kieślowski comes to Criterion as a new 4K Dolby Vision HDR encode, and the films have the following running times. Blue is 96 minutes, white is 91 minutes, and red is 99 minutes. Images on the Criterion website indicate that it will again be available as a digipack set, as it was before, and it releases in the US only on Tuesday the 7th of February as Spine 587 for the set, and each film also has an individual spine number. There have been many adaptations of the classic Shakespeare romance tragedy Romeo and Juliet put to celluloid. More recently, Carlo Carlai's 2013 version starring Douglas Booth and Haley Steinfeld. The high ampage Baz Luhrmann worldwide success, of course, with Leonardo DiCaprio and Claire Danes from 1996 is one everyone will remember. But these versions owe a lot to Franco Zeffirelli's 1968 version, and all the more so as he cast the 2 star-crossed lovers to their actual ages in the play by Shakespeare. Franco Zeffirelli's sublime take on the bard's immortal romantic tragedy breathed new life into the oft-told tale by casting actual teenagers in the title roles, and as the young lovers whose affair threatens to inflame the tensions between their feuding families in Renaissance Verona, Olivia Hussey and Leonard Whiting vividly capture the mix of adolescent ardour and turmoil that fuels their destiny-driven liaison. A sensory banquet thanks to Nino Rota's delicate score and the exquisite Oscar-winning costumes and cinematography. Romeo and Juliet is Shakespeare at its most deeply felt and passionately alive. The film stars Leonard Whiting as Romeo and Olivia Hussey as Juliet. Laurence Olivier spoke the film's prologue and epilogue, and he dubs the voice of Antonio Perfiderici, who played Lord Montague, but he wasn't credited on screen. The film also stars Milo O'Shea, Michael York, John McEnery, Bruce Robinson and Robert Stevens. Zeffirelli engaged in a worldwide search for unknown teenage actors to play the parts of the two star-crossed lovers. Angelica Houston was in fact in the running for Juliet, but her father, the director John Huston, withdrew her from consideration when he decided to cast her in his own film, A Walk with Love and Death. Leonard Whiting was 16 and Olivia Hussey was 15 during casting, but they were 17 and 16 respectively when filming actually began in the summer of 1967. Zeffirelli adapted the play in such a way as to play to their strengths and hide their weaknesses. For instance, long speeches were trimmed and he emphasised reaction shots. Even Paul McCartney at one point was in consideration to play Romeo. Laurence Olivier's involvement in the production was purely by happenstance. He happened to be in Rome filming The Shoes of the Fisherman and visited the studio where Romeo and Juliet was actually being shot. And he asked Zeffirelli if there was anything he could do and was given the prologue to read. And then, of course, he also ended up dubbing the voice of Lord Montague as well as other assorted minor roles in the film. During post-production, several scenes were trimmed or cut. Act 5, Scene 3, for instance, in which Romeo fights and eventually kills Paris outside Juliet's crypt, was filmed but deleted from the final print. According to Leonard Whiting and Roberto Bisacco, Zeffirelli cut the scene because he felt it unnecessarily made Romeo less sympathetic. And another scene where Romeo and Benvolio learn about the Capulet Ball by intercepting an invitation was also filmed, but it was also cut. However, promotional stills from that scene still survive. Actors from the 1968 film Romeo and Juliet have recently filed a lawsuit against Paramount Studios, which produced the film, for allowing the movie to be released with scenes showing them in the nude when they were minors. You've probably seen that on the news. Now, this lawsuit accuses the Hollywood studio of sexually exploiting the two young actors and distributing nude images of adolescent children. Maybe it's the age we now live in. And the court filing says Whiting and Hussey have suffered emotional damage and mental anguish for decades as a result of the way they were treated during the filming of Romeo and Juliet. Now, the film, of course, was a huge success at the time, and it has been shown to generations of students studying the Shakespeare play since. And it was nominated, of course, for 4 Oscars, including Best Director for Zeffirelli and Best Picture, and it won 2 for cinematography and costume design. Now, the stars, Olivia Hussey and Leonard Whiting, are now aged 71 and 72 respectively. The features on Romeo and Juliet are 4K digital restoration with uncompressed monaural soundtrack, excerpt from the 2018 documentary Franco Zeffirelli, Directing from Life, interviews with actors Olivia Hussey and Leonard Whiting from 1967 and 2016, there's a trailer for the film and an essay by the scholar Ramona Ray. And new cover art is based on the original poster design by Maciej Zybgowski. Now, Romeo and Juliet is Spine 1171. It has a running time of 138 minutes and it arrives in the collection on Blu-ray in the US only on Tuesday, the 14th of February. Richard Linklater's Dazed and Confused entered the Criterion Collection back in 1993, and it's considered by many to be a firm favourite. Now, he also, of course, has Slackers and Boyhood and the well-respected Before trilogy in the collection. Dazed and Confused now gets a US reissue on 4K. Now, whether this particular film deserves to get a UHD makeover is debatable, of course, especially compared to other titles in the collection patiently waiting in line for that makeover. But nevertheless, here it is. So Dazed and Confused is a 1993 American coming-of-age comedy. It was written and directed by Richard Linklater. The film features a large ensemble cast of actors who would later become stars in their own right. And they include Jason London, Ben Affleck, Mila Jovovich, Cole Hauser, Parker Posey, Adam Goldberg, Matthew McConaughey, Nikki Katt, Joey Lauren Adams and Rory Cochrane. Now the plot follows different groups of Texas teenagers during the last days of school in 1976. Now the film was in fact a commercial disappointment at the box office when it was released. It only grossed less than $8 million in the United States. But despite this, of course, the film has enjoyed critical and commercial success over the years since, and of course has now become a cult classic. Now, when asked in an interview what he wanted to do after Slacker, director Richard Linklater said that he wanted to make a teenage rock and roll spree. Now, he said he knew he wanted the story to take place on one day in the spring of 1976, but at one point it was much more experimental. The whole movie, for instance, was going to take place in a car, with the characters driving around listening to the music of ZZ Top. Casting searches were done in Austin, New York and Los Angeles. Vince Vaughn was almost cast as the bully, O'Banion, before Ben Affleck was finally chosen. Other young actors considered for roles include Elizabeth Barkley, Mira Sorvino, Ashley Judd, Brendan Fraser, Jon Favreau, Ron Livingston and Claire Danes. Casting director Don Phillips wanted Claire Danes for the girl, but she was too young. She couldn't leave school at the time, and Renée Zellweger had a non-speaking role in the film, but was originally considered for the part of Darla. But that, of course, went to Parker Posey. Now, the film came out nearly 30 years ago in 1993, and it's set 17 years before that in 1976. But the different plights of the students in Dazed and Confused remain remarkably relevant. High school football star Pink, played by Jason London, is pressured by the school to sign a written pledge saying that he'll stay away from drugs and alcohol and focus on school. But Pink's friends have other ideas. Meanwhile, freshman Mitch, played by Wiley Wiggins, and friends try to evade a promised hazing by senior bullies led by the super senior bully Fred, played by Ben Affleck. Now, the conflicts faced by Pink and Mitch are based in the universal truths of being a kid, making the tough decisions about who to associate with, how to present yourself, and ultimately how to live in a strikingly difficult stage of life. Now, there are also two soundtrack albums featuring the music from bands at the time, including Foghat, War, Sweet, Nazareth, and of course ZZ Top. The 4K release, as always, features a 4K UHD disc and separate Blu-ray disc with the original special features contained. And the edition features the director's cut, supervised and approved by director Richard Linklater and his cinematographer Lee Daniel. There's an audio commentary on the disc featuring Linklater, Making Dazed, that's a documentary by Cahin Cooperman, rare on-set interviews and behind-the-scenes footage from the 10-year anniversary celebration for the film, audition footage and deleted scenes, a trailer, and essays by critics Kent Jones, Jim DeRogatis, and Chuck Klosterman. Reprinted recollections of the filming from cast and crew, and character profiles from the Dazed and Confused companion book, as well as the original film poster by Frank Kozik. Now, where the original disc packaging excelled, of course, was with the printed supplements contained in it, and Criterion will carry those over hopefully exactly as before, and whether it will retain its original digipack with design or switch to an Amaray case is still to be decided. Now, among the best teen films ever made, Dazed and Confused eavesdrops on a group of seniors-to-be and incoming freshmen. And of course, it was a launching pad for a number of future stars. The first studio effort by Richard Linklater, it also features endlessly quotable dialogue and a blasting stadium-ready soundtrack. Sidestepping nostalgia, Dazed and Confused is less about the best years of our lives than the boredom, angst and excitement of teenagers waiting for something to happen. Now, Dazed and Confused is a great high school movie, and it has a running time of 102 minutes, and it releases on 4K UHD on Tuesday, 21st of February, and it's Spine 336. Vivre Sa Vie. Vivre Sa Vie, film en 12 tableaux. To Live Her Life, a film in 12 scenes. It's 1962 and it's a French new wave drama, and it's written and directed by Jean-Luc Godard. Now, the film was released in the United States as My Life to Live and in the United Kingdom as It's My Life. The film is divided into 12 episodes, and each episode is preceded by an intertitle. Now, Nana Kine-Frankenheim, a beautiful 22-year-old Parisian, leaves her husband Paul and her infant son, hoping to become an actress. The couple meet in a cafe and play pinball one last time before deciding to end their marriage. Now working in a record store, Nana struggles to earn enough money on her own. She tries to borrow 2,000 francs from several co-workers, but they all turn her down. And to make matters worse, Nana's landlady kicks her out of her apartment until she can pay her rent. Now, the next day, Nana meets with Paul, and Paul gives her pictures of her son to keep for herself. He invites her to dinner, but Nana declines and explains that she is seeing a film with another man. They watch The Passion of Joan of Arc, moving Nana to tears, and after the film, Nana ditches her date to meet with a man who promised he would take photos to promote her acting career. Now, when she's asked to undress for the photos, Nana reluctantly complies. And therein is the central plot of Vivre Sa Vie. Now, of course, Jean-Luc Godard passed away last year, but by this point he had certainly established himself well in the new wave community of filmmakers, and of course was renowned as an international filmmaker. He cast Anna Karina as Nana Kine-Frankenheim. Now, Anna Karina had just married Godard, and support was supplied by Sadi Rebaud as Raoul, credited in the film as Sadi Rebaud, André Labarthe as Paul, Guylaine Schlumberger as Yvette, credited as G. Schlumberger in the film, Gerard Hoffman as the boss, Monique Messine as Elizabeth, Paul Pavel as the journalist, Dmitry Denev as the guy, and Peter Kazovitz as the young man. In Vivre Sa Vie, Godard borrowed the aesthetics of the cinema verite approach to documentary filmmaking that was then becoming fashionable. And however, this film differed from other films of the French New Wave at the time, as it was photographed with a heavy Mitchell camera, as opposed to the lightweight cameras that had been used for earlier films. The cinematographer on the project was Raoul Coutard, a frequent collaborator for Godard. And Vivre Sa Vie was released shortly after Cahiers du Cinéma, the film magazine for which Godard occasionally wrote, published an issue devoted to Bertolt Brecht and his theory of epic theatre. Godard may have, of course, been influenced by it, as Vivre Sa Vie uses several alienation effects. 12 intertitles appear before the film's chapters, explaining what will happen next. Jump cuts disrupt the editing flow. Characters are shot from behind when they're talking. They are strongly backlit. They talk directly to the camera, and the statistical results derives from official questionnaires. They are given in a voiceover, and so on. Now, in Vivre Sa Vie, the film draws from the writings of Montaigne, Baudelaire, Zola, and Edgar Allan Poe to the cinema of Robert Bresson, Jean Renoir, and Carl Dreyer. Now, the film depicts the consumerist nature of Godard's Paris, a shiny new world of cinemas, coffee bars, neon-lit pool halls, pop records, photographs, wall posters, pin-ups, pinball machines, jukeboxes, foreign cars, the latest hairstyles, typewriters, advertising, gangsters and Americana, and it also features allusions to popular culture. For example, there's a scene where a melancholy young man walks into a cafe, puts on a jukebox disc, and then he sits down to listen. And in fact, that unnamed young man is in fact the well-known singer-songwriter of the time, Jean Ferrat, who is performing his very own hit, La Môme, on the track he's just selected on the jukebox. Now, Vivre Sa Vie will be released in the UK on Blu-ray, and it will contain the following special features: an audio commentary featuring film scholar Adrian Martin, a video interview with film scholar Jean Narboni, conducted by historian Noel Simpsolo. A television interview from 1962 with actress Anna Karenina. Excerpts from a 1961 French television exposé on prostitution. Illustrated essay on La Prostitution, the book that served as the inspiration for the film. A stills gallery, director Jean-Luc Godard's original theatrical trailer for the film, a new improved English subtitle translation, and a booklet, of course, featuring Godard's original scenario, a new essay by the critic Michael Atkinson, interviews with Godard himself, and a reprint by the critic Jean Collet on the film's soundtrack. And the new cover art on Vivre Sa Vie is by F. Ron Miller. Now, Karenina ended up as Godard's cinematic muse for many of his films following Vivre Sa Vie, and they enjoyed a relationship up to their separation as a couple in 1966, and of course their eventual divorce. Vivre Sa Vie was a turning point for Jean-Luc Godard, and of course it remains one of his most dynamic films. It combines brilliant visual design with a tragic character study, and it's a landmark of French New Wave that still surprises at every turn. The film has a running time of 83 minutes, and it joins the UK collection on Monday the 13th of February as Spine 512. Marguerite Duras has already established herself as one of the major figures of post-war French literature when she launched an equally fascinating and unclassifiable career in cinema, translating her elliptical experimental style to the screen through an unprecedented fusion of hypnotic, highly stylized imagery and radically disjunctive sound. Boldly reimagining the possibilities of dialogue, music, silence and architectural space, the tantalizing sphinx-like evocations of soul, deep female malaise, India Song and Baxter vs Baxter embody Duras' singular multi-sensory approach, with each opening up new spaces for the expression of women's interior worlds. Now this set releases with two of her films. India Song, which stars Delphine Seyrig, that's Michael Lonsdale, Mathieu Carrière, Claude Mann, Vernon Dobchev and Didier Flamand as co-stars. Within the insular walls of a lavish, decaying embassy in 1930s India, the French ambassador's wife, Delphine Seyrig, staves off ennui through affairs with multiple men, with the overpowering torpor broken only by a startling eruption of madness. Setting her evocatively decadent visuals to a desynchronized chorus of disembodied voices that comment on and counterpoint the action, Duras creates with India Song a haunted house movie unlike any other. Anne-Marie Streeter, Delphine Seyrig, is the wife of the French ambassador, and of course there's also co-stars like the Vice Consul of Lahore, played by Michael Lonsdale, who discusses a love affair with her, one that is impossible due to an earlier scandal where he fired on lepers, mirrors and himself. Now, although the film is set in India, it was shot mostly on location at the Chateau Rothschild. The script for India Song was based on an unproduced play which Marguerite Duras finished in July of 1972. The play had been commissioned for the Royal National Theatre by director Peter Hall. Duras had only visited India briefly in her teens, but chose to not consult any photographs from Calcutta while she was working on India Song, preferring to imagine it all herself. Dominique Sanda was the first choice for the leading role, but dropped out and was replaced by Seyrig. And finding the main location took several months. Eventually, Duras chose the Chateau Rothschild in Boulogne, which she had seen during a walk and had impressed her immensely. The Rothschild family had abandoned the building after World War II, and it had started to dilapidate. And other scenes were shot at the Grand Trianon in Versailles and in the two Paris apartments which were about to be demolished. Filming started on May 13th, 1974 and lasted 2 months. India Song was shown as part of the 1975 New York Film Festival and out of competition at the 1975 Cannes Film Festival, and it was released in France on June 4th, 1975. With Baxter Vera Baxter, Marguerite Duras reunited again with India Song collaborators Delphine Seyrig and composer Carlos D'Alessio for this hypnotically unsettling journey into one woman's existential emptiness. Ensconced in a sprawling rental villa, the world-weary Vera Baxter, Claudine Gabet, receives visits from two women, including a mysterious stranger, Serig, to whom she recounts a shocking story about her marriage, the way she lives and the reasons for her malaise. Setting her languid images to Lesasio's incongruously breezy, endlessly looping score, Duras fashions a quietly shattering portrait of marriage as a kind of prison. Vera Baxter is Marguerite Duras' very distinct take on A Christmas Carol. That's an unhappy wife visiting her husband's mistress's past, as well as an unnamed woman who either portends her own future or represents her present state of turmoil. Like Christmas Carol and Duras' own India song, this is also a ghost story, though one more totally in keeping with her earlier work in Natalie Granger than with India's haunted colonialism. Baxter, like Natalie, unfolds almost entirely inside the house of its title character, inflicting a sort of claustrophobic haunting through the unchanging locale. And there is also a particular element of supernatural business afoot as well, in the form of an unceasing South American music melody that is heard throughout the entire time. The film examines the weight of infidelity and the encumbering of masculine expectation to the contrary, despite all hypocrisy. But that doesn't stop Duras from calling in some actual witches to right old gender wrongs. Now, the film features no plotting or narrative, yet through its series of encounters, it reveals the layers of this woman's emotional destitution and the events which shapes her current psyche. Through a series of interactions, she's with the individuals who know her husband, and the viewer begins to realise how deep the abyss actually goes. These strangers are intermediaries, having more knowledge of her husband and his actions than they do of her, his own wife. Two films from Marguerite Duras come to the Criterion Collection with the following special features: a 2K digital restoration with uncompressed mono soundtrack on the Blu-rays. Newly discovered India song alternate English language audio track directed by Marguerite Duras. Marguerite as She Was, that's a 2003 portrait of the director. Programme from 2020 on the making of India song, featuring interviews with the cast and the crew. Interview from 1977 with Duras, excerpt from a 1977 documentary on actor Delphine Seyrig, and New English subtitle translations, and an essay by the film scholar Yvonne Margulis. New cover art is by Michael Boland. The two films of Marguerite Duras come to the Criterion Collection in the US only on Tuesday the 28th of February, and India Song has a running time of 119 minutes and Vera Baxter of 95 minutes, and they both combine into the single set as Spine 1172. For the next release we go to the UK, where we get the arrival of John M. Stahl's Imitation of Life. Imitation of Life explores the friendship between two struggling single mothers. One, played by Claudette Colbert, a working-class white woman who ascends to the top of the business world, and the other, Louise Beavers, her black housekeeper, whose life is shattered by the rejection of her rebellious, white passing daughter, Freddie Washington. It is in this latter relationship, attuned to America's bitter racial realities and heartbreakingly enacted by trailblazing black performers, Beavers and Washington, that lends the film its transcendent emotional power. The themes of the film, to the modern eye, deal with very important issues, passing the role of skin colour in the black community and tensions between its light-skinned and dark-skinned members, the role of black servants in white families, and maternal affection. Now, in 2005, Imitation of Life was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry, being deemed culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. And it was also named by Time magazine in 2007 as one of the 25 most important films on race. It was nominated for Best Picture, Best Assistant Director, and Best Sound Recording at the 7th Academy Awards. And the disc comes with the following supplemental features: a new introduction to the film by Imogen Sarah Smith, contributor to The Call of the Heart, John M. Stahl, and Hollywood Melodrama. A new interview with Miriam J. Petty, author of Stealing the Show. African-American performers and audiences in 1930s Hollywood about the resonance of Louise Beavers and Freddie Washington's performances. trailer which was cut for segregated black cinemas at the time of the film's release, plus an essay by Petty. New cover art is by Katya Misygbowskaya. Coming out on Monday, February 27th on Blu-ray in the UK with a running time of 110 minutes. That's Imitation of Life and its spine 1167. And finally, we look at the Robert Townsend film Hollywood Shuffle. It's a 1987 American satirical comedy film about the racial stereotypes of African Americans in film and television, and the film tracks the attempts of Bobby Taylor to become a successful actor and the mental and external roadblocks he encounters on the way, represented through a series of interspersed vignettes and fantasy sequences. Produced, directed and co-written by Robert Townsend, this film is semi-autobiographical and it reflects Townsend's experiences as a black actor. Robert Townsend himself is Bobby Taylor, an aspiring young black actor who dreams of making it big in Hollywood. Townsend is also the producer, director and co-writer of the film. Now, among the characters Townsend appears as in his daydreaming vignettes are Jasper the butler in black acting school Speed, the film critic in Sneaking into the Movies, Samius, the private investigator in Death of a Breakdancer, and Rambro, the black Rambo-like war hero in Bobby's dream about winning an Oscar. Anne-Marie Johnson is Lydia, Bobby's girlfriend, who remains supportive even as she begins to question his career choice. And she also appears in the black acting school segment as runaway slave Willie May as a hooker in the Sneaking into the Movies clip of Attack of the Street Pimps. Yes, you've heard it all. Craigus R. Johnson is Stevie Taylor, Bobby Taylor's younger brother, and he admires Bobby and his career as an actor. Helen Martin is Bobby's grandmother. She disapproves of Bobby's willingness to depict degrading black stereotypes on film. Starletta Dupois is Bobby's mother. She's supportive of Bobby, even though she agrees with Bobby's grandmother that degrading roles serve as poor examples for black youth. David McKnight is Uncle Ray. He's a former singer and he now works at a barber shop. Bobby comes to Ray with his doubts about acting and his acting career, and Ray serves as a guiding light, telling Bobby to follow his dreams. Keenan Ivory Wayans is Donald, Bobby's co-worker at Winky Dinky Dog. He discourages Bobby from acting and thinks that Bobby will not make it in Hollywood. Wayans also plays Jerry Curl in Death of a Breakdancer, one of the sequences. Lou B. Washington is Tiny, another one of Bobby's co-workers, who discourages him from acting entirely. And Brad Sanders is BB Sanders, Batty Boy, the wealthy and cynical star of the television sitcom There's a Bat in My House. John Witherspoon is Mr. Jones, Bobby's boss at Winky Dinky Dog, and he tries his best to keep Bobby a steady employee, but becomes exasperated by Bobby's constant need to attend auditions. Now, the Hollywood Shuffle players play various cast members as Bobby dreams and daydreams. Several actors appear, of course, in the vignette sequences multiple times. Townsend was inexperienced. He didn't actually go to film school and he hadn't directed a short film, but determined to tell a story about being marginalised by the industry. In 1984, he had a small role in the Oscar-nominated A Soldier's Story. Now, without any studio backing, though, Townsend was faced with financing this film on his own. Eventually, he raised $100,000 to make Hollywood Shuffle, using money he'd earned from acting gigs as well as from credit cards. It took him almost 2 years to finish the film, but in 1987 the Samuel Goldwyn Company and indie distributor snatched up Hollywood Shuffle and released it in theatres, and it actually grossed more than $5 million. That's a very impressive sum against its microscopic budget of $100,000. Now, though directors like Spike Lee, Melvin Van Peebles and Michael Schultz were already on the scene when Hollywood Shuffle hit theatres, Townsend and Wayans helped to kick the door wide open for black talent in the late 80s, ushering in a fertile period of comedic and dramatic films starring black actors in complex roles that were also directed by black directors. Now, the disc for Hollywood Shuffle contains the following supplemental features. It's a new 4K digital transfer approved by the writer, director, actor Robert Townsend, and it has a mono soundtrack. There's a new commentary featuring Townsend. New interviews with actors Rusty Kundieff, Anne-Marie Johnson and Bobby McGee. A radio programme featuring Townsend in conversation with the film critic Elvis Mitchell. There's a trailer and an essay by the critic Aisha Harris. A new cover art for Hollywood Shuffle is by Rochelle Baker. Now, the film has a running time of 81 minutes and releases on Blu-ray in the US only on Tuesday the 20th of February as Spine 1173. And Hollywood Shuffle brings this edition of Let's Talk Criterion to a close. Coming up in March, we have in the UK 2 releases, both by Douglas Sirk. That's the films All That Heaven Allows and Magnificent Obsession. And in the US, we have Mildred Pierce getting a 4K UHD makeover, and directed by Michael Curtiz, of course. Last Hurrah for Chivalry, directed by John Woo. Inland Empire, directed by David Lynch, and Chilly Scenes of Winter, directed by Joan Micklin Silver. And we play out with Low Rider by War from the soundtrack of Dazed and Confused. Until next month, from me, as always, it's goodbye and above all, good viewing.
All my friends know the low rider. The low rider is a little